Mozilla is pure evil. That's it. It's straight up simple at this point. Mozilla is evil. The makers of Firefox are bad down to their core. They have just updated their terms of use and their privacy policy for Firefox, and it is just as awful as you would possibly imagine it to be. I'm just going to read a few little lines from it for you now, and you tell me how awesome this is in your freedom-loving open web browser. You give Mozilla certain rights and permissions, says their new terms of use. You give Mozilla all rights necessary to operate Firefox, including processing data, as we describe in the privacy notice. We'll get into that in a minute, as well as acting on your behalf to help you navigate the internet. When you upload or input information through Firefox, you hereby grant us, Mozilla, a non-exclusive, royalty-free worldwide license to use that information. Yeah, if you read that again. If you upload or input information through Firefox, not if you specifically send some data to Mozilla, if you use Firefox to type something, to upload something, to drag and drop something, to click something, any of those actions, you have granted Mozilla a right to use whatever you just typed or uploaded worldwide, royalty-free, carte blanche. Evil, pure evil. Working on a Google Doc, you've just given them full royalty-free rights to whatever you just typed. I think that's an exaggeration? It's not. This is very carefully worded to make sure that the Firefox maker, Mozilla, could do anything they want with your data. If you get into their acceptable use policies, it's also quite bizarre. You may not use any of Mozilla's services too, and I'm going to read a couple of bullet points to you now. Some of them are reasonable, right? Let's say the first one. Do anything illegal or otherwise violate applicable law. Okay, so the terms of use for Firefox, they say that Mozilla says you can't use Firefox to do something illegal. Okay, that's actually sure, right? I mean, if you're committing a crime, don't use our thing to commit the crime. Okay, terms of use, fine. Then it continues, and it starts to get vague and weird and very code of conduct-y. Threaten, harass, or violate the privacy rights of others. Send unsolicited communications or intercept, monitor, or modify communications not intended for you. Okay, unsolicited communications includes comments on a forum, social media posts, replies on social media, comments on YouTube. These are all legally unsolicited communications. You also cannot threaten or harass others. Now, that could mean you can stretch that because of the way it's written. I'm not advocating people go out and threaten and harass people, but the way that it's written, it's so vague that people have utilized those words in codes of conduct throughout the industry, including several of the communities that Mozilla runs, to include things like the Lunduke Journal. Many people claim that the Lunduke Journal threatens and harasses people. Does the Lunduke Journal? No, of course not. What they really mean is that person over there says something we don't like or is critical of us, therefore they're threatening and harassing us, right? It's so vague. It's non-specific. So Mozilla can claim that you're not allowed to use Firefox if you're saying something that they don't like. You also, they say, cannot use Firefox to deceive or mislead people. Now, deceive or mislead, we're getting into very quickly the fake news realm here, right? So if you post something online that, let's say you post something online about climate change or vaccines or transgenderism or politics in general or anything, or just something critical of Mozilla, and Mozilla says we disagree with that. Therefore, they are determining that you are deceiving and misleading people. Therefore, you have been revoked the rights to use their web browser. I'm just saying this is what they've written, and it's crazy. You can also not degrade, intimidate, based on or intimidate people based on age, gender, race, ethnicity, national origin, religion, sexual orientation, disability, geographic location, or other protected category. Now, if you come out and say something like, for example, I believe that that transgenderism is a mental disorder. Okay, many psychologists would agree with you on that. But according to what Mozilla has said in their codes of conduct and whatnot in the past, that would be degrading and intimidating people based on protected categories. Therefore, you have been revoked the right to use Mozilla, to Firefox. The reason I point this out is this seems carefully crafted to allow Firefox to say, you're not allowed to use Firefox if we disagree with you. And let's get into how the data is used, right? Their privacy policy, because their privacy policy is borderline insane. It's absolutely nuts. Quote, Mozilla collects certain data, like technical and settings data. Okay, all right, so far I don't like them collecting data, but okay, technical and settings data. Now let's scroll down this really big page and see what else we've got. Oh, to serve relevant content and advertising on Firefox. We use technical data, language preferences, and location to serve content and advertising. Mozilla collects technical and interaction data such as the position, size, views, and clicks on the new tab content or ads. This data may be shared with our advertising partners. Okay, so now they're saying that not only is it technical data, like what version of the browser and what processor architecture you're running it on, but it's also interaction data, such as, note the wording here, it's not specifically saying these specific items and no more. It's saying interaction data, which may include but is not limited to the position, size, views, and clicks. Clicks. That means they're tracking your clicks. You click on things, Mozilla knows about it. And they state flat out that that data will be shared or may be shared with their advertising partners. In some instances, when ads are enabled on the new tab, right? So you create a new tab and there's ads on there. Additional browsing data may also be processed locally on your device to measure the effectiveness of those ads. Such data will only be shared with Mozilla and or our advertising partners via our privacy-preserving technologies. Privacy-preserving technologies. I've been covering this for a while now. Back early last summer, I want to say, they started adding features into Firefox called privacy-preserving attribution. Their privacy-preserving technologies were anything but privacy-preserving. What it essentially was a mass Firefox-wide framework for collecting everything you do within Firefox and transmitting it to Mozilla. Now, I mean everything. What you type, what you click, what your location is, what your IP address is, everything, right? Everything they need. It then goes to Mozilla. Mozilla then shares it with their third-party advertising partners. Now, who is one of their third-party advertising partners? Mozilla. Because Mozilla purchased an advertising company. I don't know, many people still don't realize that Mozilla is an advertising company now. They bought an ad company, and they're using that data to then sell ads to you and turn around, and that ad company as an information broker is then selling your data to other advertising companies and other information brokers. That's how this works. Privacy-preserving features are not privacy-preserving. Privacy-preserving features should be called collect your data features, right? But Mozilla is being very 1984 double-speaky here. This is not about privacy. It is about collecting your data and selling it to the highest bidders, or just any bidders, because Mozilla needs money. They're desperate right now. So that's happening, right? They are saying flat out, if you use Firefox, they're collecting everything, and then they're selling it to anyone. That's what this says flat out. They try and word it in a nice way where it doesn't seem like that's what's happening, but that's exactly what's happening. if you go down here in their privacy notice, they also talk about the data that they're collecting for other reasons, right? And how that data might be used. And one of the sections talks about to comply with applicable laws and protection purposes. Okay. Now, if a company creates a piece of online software, like a web browser, and there are laws in a given jurisdiction where they do business that require them to collect certain data should law enforcement need arise, well, that's a legal issue, right? So whether you like that or not, from the standpoint of Mozilla the corporation, do they need to collect that data? Well, legally, yes, so okay. But notice that it doesn't stop there. It doesn't say we will comply with applicable laws. It tacks on and protection purposes to that. The big heading of this section is to comply with applicable laws and identify and prevent harmful, unauthorized, or illegal activities. I want you to focus in on that harmful word. Because remember, Mozilla made it a very clear stated goal of the corporation to make sure in the years ahead, they made this goal a few years back, that all people who were centrist or right-leaning politically would be more than deplatformed, meaning they would be not allowed on the internet. That was a stated goal of Mozilla. So what is harmful according to Mozilla? Well, things that are harmful according to Mozilla is being a conservative person, being a Republican, being Donald Trump, right? They cheered when Donald Trump was banned on Twitter. They talked about doing more than that, more than deplatforming. So if you are saying something online that doesn't agree with Mozilla, you are doing something, according to Mozilla, that is harmful. Therefore, the data they collect will be analyzed and used to determine if you are doing harmful things, meaning being too much of a Republican or a conservative or just an independent that isn't 100% on board with Marxism and anti-capitalist purposes. This includes identifying, investigating, and addressing potentially fraudulent activities and other harmful activities, such as illegal activities, cyber attacks, intellectual property infringement, blah, 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 blah. But they leave that very vague and very open-ended. They don't say specifically limited to these uses. They say other harmful activities, such as, right? Performing internal compliance and security activities. So they can obtain your information, everything you add into Firefox. So meaning if you are on a website and you type something in, if you type in a search, if you click on a link, all of that data can be pulled together and used internally for compliance purposes. What does that mean? Well, they leave it nice and vague. Essentially, at this point, they've made it clear that they have a worldwide, non-revocable license to use anything you do with inside their web browser in any way, shape, or form they want, for any purpose they want. It's ridiculous. And considering that they're an advertising company, it's extraordinarily ridiculous. They've already been called out for their collection of user data in Firefox and Thunderbird under European law. This happened back in October, because the data collection within Firefox is all on by default, right? It's all on in the background. And you can go in and turn some of it off, not all, but some of it. And Firefox has routinely just turned it back on without you knowing about it. This happens regularly. And this is all falling under the guise of this privacy-preserving attribution to be used with their advertising agency and their data brokering company, right? This is pure evil, but it gets so much worse than all of that, because not only do they have all your data and they have the rights to use that data however the heck they feel like it, Mozilla as a corporation is pivoting away from all of their past branding, right? Where they're the champions of open source and open data, where they're pushing for free speech, where they're pushing forward a free and open web and all these other things. And they're rebranding as a, quote, global crew of activists, end quote. That's their new branding. In fact, they hired a expensive branding agency to come up with this new brand, which is this weird looking squiggle of green lines, where they're pushing their activism as their core product. And this is all in light of the fact that they're facing a mass reduction in the amount of income that they're going to be receiving from Google, because Google is being sued by the US government. In fact, Google already lost a massive antitrust lawsuit with the US government, and it is now in the phase where the exact punishment is being figured out. In the months ahead, that punishment is very likely, not for sure, but very likely to include something that will cause Mozilla to lose over 80% of their revenue. Google will no longer be allowed to pay millions and millions and millions of dollars to Firefox to become the default search engine in Firefox. Once that deal is taken away, Mozilla is out of money. They have to do mass layoffs. And in fact, they're already doing rolling layoffs. They're at their third layoff in the last, 1 year. Yeah, three layoff rounds in 1 year so far. They mass layoffs. And internally, they're having absolute chaos. But while that chaos is going on, they're installing new leadership. And that leadership is pushing forward that global crew of activists branding. That's their mission, right? In fact, it's so much their mission that they've installed Democratic Party leadership into board chairman roles within Mozilla Foundation. One board chair is the former CTO of the Democratic National Committee. Another board chair is an old Biden and Obama staffer who worked on the Biden transition team and all sorts of stuff. And so when you look at it, it becomes clear it's a very political organization now, to the point where they are literally hosting pro-Marxism, anti-capitalist events at luxury resorts. I know, it doesn't make a lot of sense. You would think you wouldn't go to a luxury resort, which is real capitalisty, to hold an anti-capitalism event, but that's what Mozilla does. And they did one just a couple months back at the end of 2024 when they held their feminist, decolonial, LGBTQIA plus climate justice using artificial intelligence event. That's a real thing. I keep repeating that one because it's so ludicrous. It is the most ludicrous combination of words you can possibly imagine. But they're hosting these sorts of events. They're pushing an extreme political agenda, not a political agenda, but an extreme political agenda, an off the charts political agenda, an agenda that a Babylon Bee-esque site, a parody, a satire news site would have a difficult time coming up with on their own, right? It's so extreme and ridiculous that it's beyond parody at that point, right? Weird Al would be like, well, that's a little too on the nose. It's just so ridiculous. So now we've got a situation where if you're using Firefox and you do something that Mozilla doesn't agree with, your data, who you are, what you click on, what you type, your passwords, everything, Mozilla has full access to, and you grant them the rights to do whatever they want with it. And they're an activist organization that specifically hates you. That's where we're at. That's where Mozilla's at. It's fascinating watching the decline of this organization. I mean, there was a point when the Mozilla organization was being run by Brendan Eich, who was a very vocal and proud conservative man. And they were pushing open web technologies, and they were for the free and open web and all that sort of thing, free speech and blah blah blah. Right? It was great. They were the shining light of open source. They were an example to look at for open source and open communications and freedom for everyone to be on the web. This blah 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 democratized blah 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 internet. It was great. And now here we are, just a matter of a few years later, And now Firefox is literally a data collection system and advertising system run by an advertising company who has rebranded itself as a global crew of pro-Marxism activists who want to wipe you off of the internet as a stated goal. Wild watching all of this happen. I want to say thank you to the Lunduke Journal subscribers. You have allowed me to do coverage of Mozilla, of Firefox, of all of this as it's been happening in real time over the last few years. And because of that, a lot of these topics were first uncovered by the Lunduke Journal. A lot of the strange financials of Firefox, a lot of the deep investigations into Firefox's tax records that we did, was it 2 years ago at this point? And we've been really pushing this for years and trying to show people what's been happening and the craziness within Mozilla. And no other tech news outlet has been touching the majority of these stories. And some of them have only touched on these Mozilla stories after the Lunduke Journal just pounded the drum on them for years. And that's possible. This is becoming public. It's possible because of all of you, because of everyone who subscribes to the Lunduke Journal. So go to lunduke.com, click on some links, support the Lunduke Journal, share the Lunduke Journal, just enjoy the Lunduke Journal. It is truly and deeply appreciated. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, nerds and nerdettes across the inner tubes, I do declare, end broadcast.